is kind of community conversations here on the Sun 103.5 FM. We're going to move into a new area of discussion. We're going to talk about the importance of electing office with our guest, Megan McGrorty. Hey, Megan, welcome to Community Conversations.
Megan McGrorty is here.
Yep. Okay. No, we just said push the wrong button. We got you now. Welcome. This is John Quinlan. So good to hear your voice finally. I don't think, we've had such extensive conversations on Facebook Messenger that I'm not sure we've actually heard each other's voices yet, so except on voicemail.
No, but I feel like we know each other. And I know that we definitely met at political events years ago when I went to Camp Baldwin.
You're exactly right. So it's good to bring you on the air. So just to bring our listeners and viewers up to speed, part of the reason that we're bringing you on is an interesting film that you produced. And before we get further in the conversation, it's about a 1.5-minute long clip. I want to play the trailer. And what you'll hear on here, this will be more apparent in the television version that we'll have, that'll have captions attached to it. But I know Representative Chris Taylor, Senator, there are two senators, LaTanya.
Johnson.
Okay. And then one other senator, I think.
Well, we had Kelda Royce.
Kelda Royce, that's right.
There's a couple of California people.
Okay. But yeah, kind of centered on Wisconsin and some of the interesting races that are happening, and also a voice of a younger person who hopes to run for office one day. So let's play that, and then we'll move into a conversation about what this means, the bigger picture.
Great, thank you.
In 2018, more women are running for office than ever before.
If I don't do something now to prevent it from happening 20, 30, or 50 years from now, then my child is going to be having to fight fights that people's lives have been given for, and that's not fair.
Women face unique challenges when deciding to run, but we find inspiration and support from people everywhere. When we do run, we win, and at a higher rate than men.
It really took a number of times from people coming back and saying, you need to think about this. We want to help you, and we're going to show you why you're the strongest candidate to beat Scott Walker. Again and again, for me to actually take it seriously.
And it was just the thing I needed to hear. It was just the thing that then pushed me forward and got me into this race. But I will say the support that I received from women is why I won the race.
And if this state doesn't think that we have issues with gun violence, they're dead wrong, but they know we do. But as long as that gun violence isolates itself to the streets of Milwaukee, it seems like everybody's okay with that. And that's just something that I can't accept.
I will vote for you when you run office.
The struggle is real, but this is our time. We can create change by sharing our strength. Help us continue to capture this exciting historical movement by making a contribution at gofundme.com/whysherunsdoc. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great testimonial to why all of this is so important. And just before we get into our conversation, just want to check with Jeff Robbins, the station manager here at the Sun Prairie Media Center. Do we need to do our legal ID or anything before we move into Megan's conversation?
You're listening to 103.5 FM, the Sun, WLSP LP, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin.
That pretty much takes care of it. Our thanks to Jeff Robbins, who's been helping me out these first couple of shows to try to get everything on the air. And as always, the folks at the Sun Prairie Media Center, Mara and Rachel and Lisa, are doing great stuff here. And if you haven't been involved, we encourage you to come on out. So, Megan, why don't you, when we started a basic place, I'm afraid I know bits and pieces of your biography and your interest in all of these issues, but could you just explain to our guests what your connections are to Wisconsin and what kind of the broader focus of your work is right now?
Well, I am from Wisconsin. I grew up on the north side of Milwaukee, around 59th and North.
I was just through that neighborhood 2 days ago. Yeah.
It's really changed quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I got involved in politics when I was really young. My godfather was running State Senator Lynn Edelman's campaign when I was just 12 years old.
Wow.
And
may I ask a ballpark for about how old you are now? Or?
I'm 38.
Okay.
I'm 38 now. And then when he ran again, I had my first paid campaign job in '96 when he ran, just kind of running his field up. But at the time, my sister, who I'm sure you and many of your guests probably know, Michelle McGrorty, was running his campaign.
Sure.
So I got a really, really young start in Wisconsin politics, and went on to work for Tammy Baldwin, which of course one of my favorite candidates. How could she not be? And continued on. I moved around quite a bit and worked on races throughout the country, but Wisconsin was really always one of my favorite places to work. And one of my proudest accomplishments there was when I came in 2008 as the second executive director for Emerge Wisconsin, when it was still really, really growing, where it was difficult to find a qualified class of 25. But I think now they graduated 100 people this year.
Yeah, just explain what Emerge is and what its mission is, if you could, please.
Yeah, so Emerge is the national premier training organization for women who want to run for office on all levels. That really focuses on what are the tools that women need. So it's a 6-month training program. Now a lot of the affiliate states have 2 training programs through each year. So now there's oftentimes 2 6-month programs where the women come in for a very intensive training. Each weekend is focused on a very specific element of campaigning. Media training, earned media, paid media, communications, fundraising, which of course is one of the most important ones.
How does that relate to what Emily's List does?
Well, Emily's List does a lot of similar, smaller workshops, and of course then Emily's List is, a huge.
But their focus, of course, is what made them unique, and then others followed this model eventually, is this packaging of resources, so that if you're wanting to, you live in Wisconsin and you think it's also important to elect women in Kansas and New York, this gives you a mechanism to join with other people in a powerful way. We've done that in the LGBT community through something called the Victory Fund. And some folks may say, well, what are people who live in other states doing about, in terms of having an interest in who runs for Congress in another part of the country? But of course, who is elected in different parts of the country, who serves on the congressional committees, who advances legislation, that has a bigger impact for us all. So we all should really be involved in that bigger picture.
Absolutely. And I think what Emerge has done in the different affiliate states, and now, I think they're in 24, is, they've made that network really accessible, where you are coming in and you're meeting with local women who are going to help you on your campaign. And so in addition to learning all of those practical skills that you need, you get what I think is the most important thing, which is a network of support, which I think with the Me Too movement and this historical election for women, what we're really learning is women coming together and supporting each other is absolutely how we're going to win these elections, but then that's also how we're going to win policy change.
So I think I told you, I sort of give him a hard time about this, and if he's listening this morning, he can get back at me next time he comes on the program. But Matt Rothschild, who was the editor of the Progressive magazine for many decades, a very savvy political person, now at the Wisconsin Democracy Campaign. Are you still hearing me?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yep, I'm still here.
Yeah, no, you probably have other things going on in the background there. But anyway, Matt was on my program, and we were on with Andrea Kaminsky from the League of Women Voters, and we were making what seemed like kind of a no-brainer observation that it's important to get more women involved in politics. And he kind of interrupted and just sort of interjected, well, I think that's kind of a tokenistic way of looking at it. It's, there are women, across the spectrum who are involved in politics, just as there are men. And, and that kind of association, in my mind, it really doesn't cut it. I don't think it's that important. The important thing is to field good candidates. So, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, wouldn't it only be tokenism if women were, 10%?
Yeah.
Or, not, actually more than the majority.
Andrea and I kind of countered with that, and why are we aiming for? Why do we think it's a great thing that whereas there were 1 or 2 women in the Senate not that long ago, and now there are 20? Why aren't there 50 or 60 or 70?
Right. I mean, Wisconsin. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that the representation number in the state legislature is 24%.
I think you're about right. Yeah.
And academics say, and I don't know how they come up with this figure, but for women to actually have an effect on policy change, we would need to be at 30%.
Yeah.
So, of course, just imagine what could change if we were at 50%. But to think of it as tokenism, that we need to get more women involved, when we're so far from even that 30% threshold, is kind of astounding to me.
And I'm paraphrasing him, and we'll remove Matt from the platform now, because I think there are other folks who have this concern or this misconception. We had the same thing, I think, when Tammy or early pioneers like Dick Wagner, Jim Uros, who was the first openly gay person to win election in Madison, the fourth person, one person before Harvey Milk even, to win election nationwide. In the context of the LGBT community, we've had more open lesbian elected officials. We're way into the 50s by now, more so than the Bay Area or New York or other places. We are way ahead of the game. Of course, we were ahead of the game on state gay rights law and other things too. But what I remember when Tammy was first running for office, and our friendship goes back to about 1985. And as I was introducing her into the community, because at that point I was politically involved to the point where I could do that. Even people in the lesbian and gay community says, I'm not going to support someone just because you're in. To which my response is, you don't have to, because she is highly qualified. She works on all these issues. She has this commitment. And yet, as a woman and a lesbian, there are perspectives she brings, approaches to governing that might be different and that are badly needed. Because when it's all men, there's a lot of competition and a lot of mono-on-mono type dynamics. There isn't necessarily a lot of collaboration. A lot of the rabid partisanship that's has developed because of traits that manifest more in the male side of the species than the others. As a gay man, I will tell you, I have to deal with those dynamics sometimes myself, with the guys that I date.
Absolutely.
So this isn't trying to cast aspersions on all white guys or any other group of people. But the problem is when government is not reflective of the broader diversity along lines of gender, racial and cultural background, disability, a whole sphere of things, then the voices that are expressing what needs to happen are limited, and we don't get to where we need to be. So we've got to have, in this case, more women in office.
Absolutely, and that's the most common thing. And I've now interviewed over 360 women, and they aren't all candidates. A lot are organizational leaders, a lot are campaign staffers, but the most common thing that women are talking about is collaboration. They're talking about collaboration on their teams. They're talking about the kind of collaboration that they would do once they are elected. And when I go to events and I film where there are multiple candidates and I'm listening to the male candidates speak and the women candidates speak, for me that is always the biggest striking difference, is that I'm not hearing the men talk about collaboration. I'm not hearing them talking about their teams. I'm not hearing them talk about the people who they would bring with them when they're in elected office to actually push these policies through. And that inclusiveness is the real key difference that I've seen, both working for male and female candidates since the late 90s, but especially in doing this. So
I've seen, whether it's the Madison Common Council or boards that I've been on, or even neighborhood leadership, when women become involved, they change the culture. They don't do that in a threatening way. It's not as if white men are being forced away from the table. What happens is the table gets bigger and more inclusive and more creative and lots more fun, frankly. The meetings go much better, and there's humor injected and compassion. To a certain extent, I think it's a matter of sometimes, we won't just put men in this category, but I think for various reasons, folks in the so-called mainstream are very intellectual in their approach to things. And you got to bring the heart into it. Now, that doesn't mean some kind of primitive, irrational emotion. The Greeks talked about the heart as the place where wisdom and life experience resides, along with compassion and intellectual, ability and everything. Too often, the politics are devoid of those qualities.
Absolutely, and that I'm glad that you brought that up, because it's something that's been really interesting in doing my interviews, is that I would say about 80% of the time when I interview women, they cry at least once, usually 2 or 3 times. And a lot of times they say, can we stop? Can you edit that out? I don't want to look weak. I don't want to look vulnerable. I don't want to be attacked in the way that Hillary was. But I think that I want to really show that this would be a different approach to politics. This, men aren't necessarily crying about these things because they're not having that social connection that women will bring to the table. And that's something that I do really want to highlight and show as a strength in women candidates, that they care so much.
Yeah.
That, that tears are appropriate because we're the terrible place in our country. We should be crying.
I have a reputation, whether it's, accepting a community award or giving a speech that I almost always cry. And so I think that there is a place for that. And some of even my gay male friends give me a hard time about that. Well, you shouldn't do that. That's so inappropriate. It's just like, no, it's not. It's part of being a human being. And most of the guys I do admire most as male politicians. That's not an aversion to them. Hey, I just want to set up, just for those folks who may have joined us in midstream, again, I'm talking with McGrorty, and she is a political activist, works supporting it right now, women across the country who are running for office, but she is also the producer of a remarkable new film, and YouTube has skipped ahead to the next page, so remind me again what that film is called.
Why She Runs.
And so the hundreds of interviews that Megan has been alluding to are with women across the country who are talking about why it's important for more in office. And of course, we live in a time where I think there are a couple hundred candidacies now. The face of the House of Representatives and the Senate could really change dramatically because of the involvement of women, and it's just reflective of a desire for profound change, for not doing the status quo anymore. The election of likely Representative-elect Ocasio-Cortez in New York symbolizes that.
Who I was lucky enough to follow the week right before her primary.
Excellent. So
very exciting.
Let's use that as a case in point. So you had an incumbent who had been in there for well over a decade, who was, I think, basically slated to be the third most powerful Democrat in the House. And all the polls had her behind by 30 points or something like that, but the voters surprised people. How did that transformation happen?
With her, it was really the ground game. She had an intense ground game that I think, polls were not picking up on the people power in that race, and it was real.
So what does the ground game mean for those of us for those folks who are listening who aren't political geeks like us?
It means that you walk into a campaign office and it is buzzing. There, were people from, all over the country, all over the neighborhood. There were people speaking multiple languages. In the district that she was running in, there are 110 different languages being spoken. And she had put a team together that could really reach all of those people. And they were out knocking doors and over 100-degree heat in the Queens and Bronx, and just really, really, really sharing their hearts, sharing their stories, talking about immigration, talking about how immigration affected them. And it's those real people who come together and volunteer. And when you see a campaign office that is so full of people that people can't even hear each other on the phone bank, that's a winning campaign, no matter what those polls are going to show. That's what I see as I travel the country. Everywhere I go, these women campaigns, you walk in, and those headquarters are packed, and people are in and out the doors. They are pounding the doors. They are talking from their hearts. And that's something I'm really seeing different this election cycle than all the cycles I've been through before.
I don't know how familiar our listeners or viewers are the geography of the other boroughs of New York, but that area of North Queens and South Bronx is, as you said, one of the most diverse areas in this entire country. But the story I love to tell about it is the gays and lesbians were prohibited from marching in the St. Patrick's Day parade back in the early 90s. The Supreme Court upheld that as allowable discrimination because they were private. The Hibernian Society was a private organization. And so for a long time, we had to develop alternative festivals. And very early on, I wish I could remember his name, but there was an activist who arranged a march down the main street of Queens. Now, it was the LGBT community that was at the core originally, but very quickly, folks from those 110 immigrant groups joined in. And then I think eventually about a fourth of the folks who joined in were working class white guys who also saw a stake in this, who also felt as if they were the other and that this was an opportunity for them to make a powerful statement coming together. But I think that in microcosm is what's happening across the country, is that the demographics are changing, but yeah, and some level that's not even fair, because the demographics have always been there. We've always been a very diverse country. We certainly are increasing that diversity, but the difference is now people are claiming their voice.
They really are, and I mean, the unions and those working class white men, have always been there. But I have to say, I am just even more impressed with the work that the labor community and those kind of, those typical people who I've seen out knocking doors are still doing this election, are still doing even harder. I go to these, local races in California for, a city council, a lesbian, very, very liberal woman, and there's 50 carpenters just, ready to pound the doors for 6 hours that don't look like the rest of the demographic there. But people are really coming together in the party right now.
Well, I think we've made a mistake.
It's really exciting.
Yeah, I do think we've made a mistake. I mean, it's complicated, this backlash, the fact that, the divide between Republicans and Democrats, that white guys are on one side of the fence and then the rest of us, including women, on the other. And I mean, there certainly is a backlash, again, that is based in prejudice or based in fear and insecurity that, gosh, if all these diverse people start coming to the table, I'm going to be pushed away. And I mean, again, the mystery of why so many people embrace Trump's message, even though there's this elitist rich guy who's totally oblivious to things. Why would you embrace him as a hero? There's something legitimate there. But what I was starting to say was, I think we've made a mistake sometimes within the LGBT movement, the feminist movement, anti-racism, education, to always make white guys the villain. Because they are part of the solution too. They are part of our community. They're our friends, our relatives. They also face many of the same obstacles we do. Maybe not in the same explicit ways that misogyny and homophobia and racism manifest, but they have struggles too. And so, if we're going to move forward, including in this effort to try to bring more women into office, those white guys have to be part of the solution.
Yep, and I love when I go and I follow a campus and we get, a group together that's, a Latina, lesbian, single mom and 2 Hispanic carpenters and, a white soccer mom, all out together talking about, the shared reasons behind these women candidates who can represent all their values. And it's really heartening.
And of course, the distressful thing about the time we're living in is we have leaders that are trying to divide us. They're trying to preach, simple, divisive strategies. Well, those people don't get you. If someone lives in Madison, Milwaukee, they'll never understand someone in a small town or Aurelia or Wisconsin, because they're city slickers or versions on that and all the rest of the stuff. Now, there's legitimacy to that, because, as somebody who grew up in small towns in Wisconsin, I get upset with my brethren here in Madison who want to blame everything on those people and the rest of the state. It's a version of those people that is almost as repugnant as when it's used in other ways. But I think by and large, we have a lot more in common than we have different. And if progressive political forces are gonna be powerful again in this country, we've got to seize on that. We've got to not just be cutting down the other side, but we've got to say what we have to offer. And what we have to offer is something that's to the benefit of everybody.
Yes, absolutely. And I really see that happening on all of the women's games that I'm visiting throughout the country. And, they're very different in different parts of the country, but that is one thing that is the same. It's very diverse groups of people who are working on these campaigns.
So where are you at in the production of your film, and when are you going to come to Wisconsin to share it with us?
So we're going to be continuing to be shooting pretty much every day up until the election. So got back from a really great trip to New Mexico, and we're going to be hitting Texas, Florida, and Georgia still, and that's my team. And then in 14 different states, I have local production crews, and it's all volunteer. Everybody's doing it as a labor of love. We're going to be following all the kind of final get out the vote efforts. And then I have a handful of candidates who I'll be following up with in November and early December to, see how it went, see how they felt. Hopefully, I know there's going to be a lot of victory stories, but there's also going to be some victory stories in those losses. And then post-production, I actually have a Wisconsin-based editor. Her name is Lily Hansen. She's based out of Madison, and she's already working on some of the post-production stuff, but then that'll really start in full force in January, and then we're hoping that it'll be done by May, and the Wisconsin National Organization of Women is going to be hosting a screening in Madison, and then we're also working on a Milwaukee screening, hopefully at the Oriental.
So we can work this out offline, but the Wisconsin Film Festival is in April, and the film may or may not be finished there, but I do a lot of assistance. We've done some shows out of the studios here to support them, and I'd love to put in a good word for you, because I think that would be an excellent venue. And more the festivals are not just a place to showcase films, but to talk about the process of filmmaking, which for me is just fascinating as someone who wants to make films. I think I told you I had a chance to go at the end of June. Ford Foundation had invited me and 12 other producers of independent media, film, video, and radio, to share each other's works, and then we're going to try to develop distribution networks that get those local stories collectively out, in the broader realm of the country. The reason why the Ford Foundation is doing this, of course, is we are so balkanized now. We're only looking at a very narrow piece of the larger picture. And when you can get a diversity of voices from communities of color and women and LGBT people and people with disabilities and working class white guys and the whole picture, that's the way we're going to grow beyond this time of division. We need to hear each other's stories.
Yeah. Absolutely, and that's the big challenge for independent producers like myself, is that I'm traveling around and meeting all these other people who are making documentaries, but they're making documentaries about specific races. They're making documentaries about Trump. They're making documentaries about the blue wave. But I haven't met other people who are telling this exact story, and I have had a fair amount of interest from distributors who want to come to our Hollywood screenings, but just like writing a novel, you don't get that money until it's done, but it's incredibly expensive to make a documentary, especially traveling across the country. So that's why we really, really do need more organizations like that, fostering people who are, in the first stages of independent filmmaking.
Are you familiar with the documentary that came out, I'm guessing maybe 2004, Unbought and Unbossed, that covered Shirley Chisholm's landmark democracy? Yeah, landmark run. Shirley Chisholm was the first African-American woman to be elected to Congress in 1968, and in 1972, she ran a fairly credible campaign in a pack of, a dozen or more people running in the Democratic Party, on which George McGovern eventually prevailed, but she ran a very credible candidacy. But it was interesting because early on, people like John Lindsay from New York, who was actually running far behind, saying, well, why don't you just get out of the race and allow viable candidates like me to, why are you taking votes away from us? Just briefly, I can hear in the enthusiasm in your voice. This was a landmark film for you too. I interviewed Sharla Lynch, who was the young documentary filmmaker, and just her story was really powerful too. But anyway, the thing about a candidacy, you alluded to this earlier. The people that you're filming, some of them are going to win, some of them not. But each campaign will engage people in the process who were never engaged. With Shirley Chisholm, she was in her 60s, I think, at the time she was running, her 50s or 60s, and the core of her base was young college people that just said, hey, she's preaching something different here. She is modeling a whole different way of doing things, and we want to get involved. And that included people like Barbara Lee, now an outspoken, wonderful congressperson from the Bay Area, who continues her legacy. So rooted in these historic candidacies, and they're still historic because there's still not enough women in office, is something greater than just the campaign itself or the end result. The people who get involved have their lives changed. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. It absolutely is. And when you mentioned the name of that documentary, the first person who comes to mind who really carries that legacy is a woman who has been a strong mentor to me for over 10 years. Her name is Kimberly Ellis. And she used to be with Emerge, and she was the affiliate director when I was an executive director, so she really trained me. And she ran to be the first African American chair of the California Democratic Party. And she brought thousands of people to that convention, involved in that race, so many people who had not been connected before. And now, 2 years later, when I'm doing all these interviews, almost all of the women who I talk to in California, and I say, tell me about the first woman who was a mentor to you. Tell me the first woman who told you should run. And again, it's this woman, Kimberly Ellis, and I want to give a shout out that she has started a new organization carrying on that legacy that is called Unbought and Unbossed. And I would encourage people to check out that website and check out the important work that she's doing to help women candidates all across the country. And that's something people should really check out. It's Unbought, Unbossed with Kimberly Ellis.
We'll definitely look that up. Yeah, no, I encourage folks to do that. And next time we have you on, we'll be sure to emphasize that. We'll get this out otherwise. The other woman, of course, who changed many people's lives in terms of the articulate, eloquent nature of what she did was Barbara Jordan, representative from Texas, who I think really came into people's attention when she served on the Judiciary Committee that was considering impeachment of Nixon in the early 70s. Her voice, it just was spellbinding. She had this eloquence and depth and compassion and yet intellectual power that were all embodied. Shirley Chisholm was an amazing orator as well. So you can't even. Yeah, there's no use comparing them because they were just both extraordinary. But I've heard so many stories too of people who saw Barbara out there taking a lead role in this historic deliberation about whether our president should continue in office, and then quickly became aware of all of the other gifts that she had to bring us. So when you're a woman of color who's running, there are all these other dimensions, groups that have never felt as if they've had a voice in our society suddenly are being brought into the fore in powerful ways.
Yeah.
So just so many different aspects of this. Let me. We didn't have a chance to have our pre-production talk last night, so I want to gently take you where you're comfortable in going here. But all of this is existing, of course, against the backdrop of a week in which the nomination hearings are occurring. Christine Ford. I'm trying to remember her middle name. Do you recall? Yeah,
no.
Okay. Yeah. Anyway, Ms. Ford, who is bringing in these allegations from earlier, when she and nominee Kavanaugh were in high school of sexual assault of a pretty profound nature. She's going to be testifying this Thursday. Have finally, taken place here. But all of this is so much resonant with the experience of Anita Hill during the Clarence Thomas nomination, and the ways that that women were, and Anita Hill in particular, were totally discounted, where people found all these ways to discredit her. I remember watching Orrin Hatch.
Discounted and severely degraded. I was a child when I was listening to those hearings and listening to them again, just the ways in which the questions were posed and made to make her feel and look degraded in every moment is just, it's so astounding to see that. And then what's going on with Christine Ford right now, it's just heartbreaking, very, very hard to take.
And to see the same words being used over again by some of the same Orrin Hatch was making this convoluted argument. Well, Ms. Hill, why didn't you report him at the time? And then why did you continue to socialize with him? And if he did such horrible things, why are you doing this? Like, just oblivious to the way that women have to function in this society. You have to hang out with these jerks because they are the people who pay the bills. They are the people who control the levels of power to a certain extent. And you do that with as much integrity as you can. You try to report things when you can. There was an obliviousness then on the members of that committee, including folks like our former vice president who chaired the committee, Joe Biden, and other folks. And he is contrite about that, to his credit, but I'm not sure he even fully appreciates how much he messed up back when. So we gotta, this Me Too moment is partly about addressing the individual injustices that occurred against women, but it's this broader picture of, guys, we try to hold up these guys earlier, but stop being so oblivious here. Put yourself in the shoes of what women have had to face over the decades, over the centuries, in terms of being condescended toward, put down, legislation and actions being taken to try to put women in their place. I'm sorry, we're not going to put up with that anymore. And what you're doing is directly resonant to all those strains, it seems.
Yes. And it's, it's something that having, grown up, starting in politics very young, something that I was aware of like way before I should have been. And, when I'm talking to women now, and especially when I'm talking to these younger women campaign staffers, there are still so many of these, quote unquote microaggressions that both, men who call themselves feminists and women who will say, no, I don't know that I've had any of those moments, will hear these things and say, oh, well, actually, yeah, that does happen to me all the time. And I'll just give a very, very quick example. But, about a year and a half ago, I was working for a congressional candidate, a man, who was, very much, I'm a feminist. I am, I want to understand, and we had all these long car drives together that I was sharing with him a lot of these experiences. It's, just things from, being out with lobbyists at, at the Wisco and pretending to throw shots over my shoulder because, you have to keep up, that you can't get too drunk. And all like those little things. And I'm sharing this with him. And then we went to this event that is a very like old school Democrat event. A lot of people, 60s plus, very, very kind of old-fashioned Democratic event. And we're going around the room. I'm very much acting as his, political consultant. And yet almost every person who he introduced us to asked if I was his wife.
Oh, jeez.
And almost every single time after we had just had a 2-hour conversation in the car about all the experiences I've had working with men where it's been assumed that either I'm having an affair with them or that I'm their partner. It couldn't possibly be that I'm, a political equal. And every single time he would go, oh, don't I wish.
Oh, my. Yeah, that's enlightened.
And
this is after hours of conversation you've had, and you just wonder, did he hear a word I had to say?
Right, and then we had like another 3-hour conversation about it. And it's like he didn't understand how I could not see that as a compliment.
I have an interview that I did about a month and a half ago with an amazing bishop in the United Church of Christ. She's an African American lesbian. But one of the central conundrums we faced about this time is obviously if you have some framework, those working class men in Queens knew what it would be to be the other, to be discounted, to have the powers that be come down on you, so they joined in the march. To discount that, or the person who starts a cancer survivors group because a family member's been affected, or other things. But what Bishop Flunder did was to say, yeah, that's great, but why don't we just do the right thing and empathize with and try to understand someone who has an experience that's different from our own? So guys don't face this, but why can't they still get it?
Right, especially when it's right.
And when it affects their mothers, their daughters, their best female friends, I mean, we've got to get out of it. And again, we're painting with far too broad a brush because there certainly are men who model something very, very different. It's just that the ones who don't are very often in a position of power, and that really hurts the rest of us.
It really does.
So
and I think that talking about it is the most important we can do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you mind if I broach the subject of the post on which we met? Was talking about a prominent case of a gentleman in the news. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I just don't want to I don't want to talk about any one person.
Well, let's quickly bridge it to a larger battle. So I'll explain. If you don't feel comfortable with it, we'll edit it out of the tape, and I don't know. We'll figure it out. Just stop me if I'm going in that direction. No, but so where I met Megan was through Facebook, and I had posted that Al Franken had announced that he might run for office again. And understandably, there are folks who think that he was handled differently than other people are in our political life. I mean, there's an observation made that the Kavanaugh situation is being handled very differently than Al Franken was, that he was forced out of office very quickly. It was a unanimous petition, essentially, by all the women in the Senate that said it was time for him to leave. And there were allegations, not just one, but at least, I think, a dozen or more in the end of women. They were offering different experiences that he had, where he had perpetrated insensitivity, harassment, and things verging in the direction of physical touch that was inappropriate, a whole lot of other things, and essentially also an abuse of power that was implicit to all of these things. Now, folks are saying that on the spectrum, he's not a Harvey Weinstein. He's not up there in the constellation of all of that, and we just have to recognize relativity, proportionality, other things. So anyway, when I brought this up, people started pontificating about that and just saying, no, it was an outrage. There's no way he should have been driven from the Senate, and it was all trumped up by a conspiracy person, on the other side, and they accused one of the women who had brought the charges as having an ulterior motive, et cetera, and it just got into a very messy conversation. And then you wandered into the room, essentially, and you shared your very authentic experiences, and I think people did learn. There was pushback, and it was probably a pretty painful experience for you, but you shared something that happened, and go into whatever detail you want, but that's one of the reasons why you and I bonded, because I empathize with that. And just briefly, I haven't even had a chance to tell you about this, but I had an experience in a small town in northern Wisconsin where I grew up, where a right-wing anti-abortion violence advocating person got into an argument with me, then proceeded to get me arrested for disturbing the peace, and the police manhandled me for an hour and a half. And a lot of people didn't want to believe me. Not being believed is one of the most painful things you can have happen, especially when it's people who should know better, who supposedly care about you, and people who should be in affinity with you politically. So what I saw you going through on that day really struck home with me, but you persisted in a way that was full of integrity and nuance and meaning, and I think that's what we have to do moving forward.
I think so, and I think it goes without being said what all the challenges are that women have to face when thinking about, making an accusation or talking about a personal experience, because we know from historical evidence what is going to happen. That our credibility will be questioned, that we will be asked to recount something that was incredibly painful and incredibly painful detail, and we'll be asked, why didn't we say something at the time? Why didn't we say enough? Why wasn't it different? And that's why it's so hard for women to come forward with these things, and it's so hard to find a balance when, I'm a woman who has, experienced countless Me Too women and moments in politics, and have heard of so many of these experiences that women don't want to share, because we're trying to find this line between we're powerful, we're moving forward, it's enough, and really past and having to go through those emotions again. And so, it's been a fine line for me in the documentary about how much I want to personally share, and how much you want to just move forward and make a difference and focus on that, without having your name dragged through the mud.
Well, that's the other consequence, that it just isn't being recognized, that then you become the target of folks that just want to pull out all the stops to discredit the messenger rather than to get at the underlying issues. Right. So just not to be obtuse about this. I mean, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, it's just considering the consequences. I just cannot understand why anyone in this world would still think that a woman would make a false accusation like that. So that, people will pull out these tiny circumstances over history where that maybe has happened, and can paint a whole group of women as lying, as exaggerating something that no woman wants to talk about.
So it's just not to be obtuse or to about this, because we've sort of explained it to someone who's confused about what we're talking about. There was an incident involving Al Franken in which you were placed in a very uncomfortable, inappropriate place, and you don't necessarily have to do that. I believe you, and so I don't even want to litigate it all over again. But let's take whatever you like from that experience, but let's put it in the larger picture. One of the important things here is that this isn't just a phenomenon of the political right. It does happen in Democratic Party settings. It happens in workplaces across the board. That gentleman who was very enlightened that you bonded with, didn't get all of it. And so anyway, there are all kinds of aspects in which we have to bring this into the mainstream and recognize it's not some isolated phenomenon that's only perpetrated by people we figure are our political enemies. It's much more widespread than that. And I think the back and forth about Al Franken, and I would just offer, I had a chance to work with him a bit when I was on the Air America affiliate here in Madison. He could be the nicest person, but he could also be the biggest jerk. I have no question that he did some very inappropriate things. And I know people who know him. And so anyway, folks who have him up on a pedestal as a saint, that's just not the case. And I guess maybe that's where we keep winding around is yeah, I mean, let's be proportional. Let's put things into relative perspective. I think, for example, what happened with Aziz Ansari is in a different category. I think there's also not an understanding of the way that men of color are desexualized, and it relates to a larger struggle. I mean, anyway, we don't necessarily have to go there, but it is complicated. I think what it comes back to in some basic level is we, in this era in which we are sometimes in relationships with people through applications, we have to understand the complex nature of our interactions with each other, our sexuality, and just have a more authentic, more grounded discussion. Just the last thought on this, I was in a Sunday school class yesterday, and the Sunday school class's leader, her daughter, is part of the wrestling program here in Sun Prairie. And so some of the guys forfeit rather than, they say, are uncomfortable wrestling with a girl. But it could be that they're uncomfortable with losing to a girl. But she was just saying, she was just saying, but isn't that going to verge on inappropriate touching and all kinds of other things? And she just emphatically said no, because it is not a sexual context in which that is appropriate. And that's the distinction we have to make moving forward.
Yeah. Absolutely, I think those are.
No, I'm up on my pulpit here, so I'm not giving you a chance to weigh in. No, but to come back to your basic point, it really is something universal, and we have to get at it across the board. Whether it be an Al Franken, whether it be people on the Republican side of the aisle, including our president. The only way we're going to get at this is to be authentic about it, not to make it a political tool, but to make it a matter of basic human dignity and compassion.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So any thoughts about just how this week may play out? And I guess let's vision a world in which the right stuff happens, that maybe Christine Ford is heard, and this launches us further down the path in which the Me Too movement has meaning, but not just for women, but for all of us, for men and for people of color, other people who haven't been heard. I mean, I'm optimistic. Dr. King, is quote, I guess it wasn't his, but it's really powerful in times like this. The arc, I believe, does curve toward justice. It meanders all over the place in getting there. Do you think the arc is curving in that direction?
I do think it is. And I want to hope for the best. I want to, expect the best of our government and our people. And I think that if she is heard and something does change, I think it will bode incredibly well in November, because I think there's still a lot of doubters out there that this is going to be not only a blue wave, but a pink wave for women, and that it's going to be a historical year for women. I think it's just that one more sign that those women need to get to the polls, get involved, know that it can happen and that it is happening, and to be a part of this change, that it's a really exciting time to be a part of.
As we move into our last several minutes, something I wanted to bring up early on, there's an internalized aspect of this. In the gay community, we talk about internalized homophobia, that sometimes we end up, putting society's expectations, all of the prejudice and everything on ourselves. We limit ourselves because of how pervasive that is. I think there's, to a certain extent, that can occur among my female friends. And I manifest some of that too, because part of my struggle as a gay man is folks who don't want me to be feminine, who don't want me to be like a woman. I mean, that's misogyny, in a lot of ways. Here's where I'm going with this. It's just that that when that becomes a dynamic. So what I was thinking of is that the Cap Times did a series. They interviewed Barbara Lawton. They interviewed a lot of the women in the legislature and asked them, had they ever experienced moments of intimidation or moments in which they were limited because they were women? And almost without exception, they all said no. And if you dig deeper there, I think it's coming back to what you said. They don't want to be pictured as a victim. They don't want to fall into the trap that some say Hillary Clinton fell into, that she was complaining about the very real misogyny she faced. But if you do that, it's a catch-22, because then people say, oh, well, that goes to show you she's just into herself and she's making excuses and she's not being accountable and doing the right, Isn't that kind of the dilemma we get into?
It really is, and in a lot of the interviews that I do, that is often the first answer to that question. And then when you dig a little bit deeper, the interview gets much, much longer when we start to talk about the reality of it and take off those messaging hats and get real.
Yeah.
Because that's not the truth.
So the message of a film like yours, I think, also has resonance with women who are in office, women who are supporting female candidates. A good friend of mine who's a counselor has actually written a book about this internalization that it's so pervasive, and she works with women to help them overcome some of this. And I'm a guy, and I'm going to sound condescending very quickly if I go too much further down this trail, but I think I'm getting an affirmation for you. This is a very real phenomenon, that the weight of all of this is so severe that you can't help but fall into it yourself. You need support. You need affirmation as women to be able to do the things you need to do to overcome all these barriers.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we discuss in the interviews is, internalized bias that women have against other women. And it's two of the questions that I ask, where very often the woman candidate will really have to pause and think about the answer. And the two questions are, tell me about a time when another woman gave you a piece of advice that was more of a personal judgment. And the other one is, in this year of the women, the latest FEC reports still show that women who give to both male and female candidates give a significant percentage less to women candidates. Yeah. And why do you think that is? And so many women get stuck on that because they either didn't realize or they are not sure how to answer.
So what do you hope projecting?
And those are some real...
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And a lot of women have said, I'm going to go look through my contribution records right now and see if I've been doing that.
Yeah,
and I'm going to start to think about the advice that I'm giving other women. And is that a judgment? Or is that something that can really help her?
So with a little less than 90 seconds to finish out the conversation, I'm sorry to interrupt, but just want to make sure you can make any points that we haven't made here. It's just, so where do you see things going? What effect do you hope the film that you're producing? Please mention the name again. And again, you'll probably be showing it here late spring, early summer of next year. Mm-hmm. But where do you hope things will go from here?
For the film or for the world?
Yeah, after people see the film, what do you hope they walk away from with it?
What I hope that they walk away from is being able to see themselves in these candidates. There's so many answers that these women give that show all of the similarities, but then also all of the things that are different. And I want the women who to see this film to see themselves in that role and see what did it take for these women to be able to do it, what were their success stories, what did they learn, and now I'm going to go out and do it, and that's my hope.
All right. And Megan McGrorty, thank you so much for a very rich conversation, and one I hope we will continue now that we've actually heard each other's voices firsthand. And we'll get you back here. And actually, I think it'd be fun to follow your journey around the country, all these races as we go ahead, maybe with some shorter interviews that just will kind of punctuate that flavor. This has been Community Conversations. This is John Quinlan. Thank you for all of us joining on live radio, on podcast, on podcast TV version of all. Please do join us in future weeks and have a great week.